Have you ever wondered what would happen if you stopped explaining yourself? If you just quietly stepped back and let everyone wonder where you went? There's something magnetic about people who disappear into themselves and return transformed. They don't announce their evolution, they just show up different, and everyone feels it. You sense this power calling you. While others chase validation through constant visibility, you're being pulled towards something deeper. They think you're missing out, but you know better. Every moment alone isn't isolation, it's incubation. You're not avoiding life, you're preparing to live it at a level they can't even imagine. What if your urge to step away isn't weakness, but the first sign of real strength? What if solitude is where ordinary people go to become extraordinary? Carl Jung discovered something revolutionary. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. He understood that society doesn't want individuals, it wants performers. And the moment you stop performing, everything changes. This video is for you if you feel drained after social gatherings that used to energize you, if you've started questioning traditions everyone else accepts without thinking, if you sense there's a deeper version of yourself waiting to emerge. You're ready for the transformation that begins with stepping back. You know that feeling when you're in a crowded room but feel completely alone? That's not isolation. That's your psyche telling you something crucial. You're surrounded by people playing roles, following scripts, maintaining personas. And here you are, increasingly unable to keep pretending. But here's what's really happening beneath the surface. Society operates on what Jung called the collective unconscious. Shared patterns, expectations, behaviors that everyone adopts without questioning. It's like we're all tuned to the same frequency, broadcasting the same show. But some people, maybe you, start picking up different signals. This isn't random. Your psyche is individuating, Jung's term for becoming who you truly are rather than who you're supposed to be. Think about it. Every time you feel that disconnect, that exhaustion from normal interactions, that's not weakness. That's your authentic self rejecting the costume it's been forced to wear. The fascinating part? Society needs you to stay in character, because when one person steps off stage, others start noticing the performance too. Your growing discomfort with small talk, with surface relationships, with going through the motions. That's not antisocial. That's conscious. You're becoming aware of the show, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. And this creates the trap. You feel guilty for pulling away, wrong for needing space, selfish for prioritizing your inner world. But Jung understood something profound here. He said we're not meant to dissolve into the collective. We're meant to differentiate, to become individuals who can then choose how to engage, not from obligation, but from authenticity. Jung introduced a concept that changes everything: individuation. It's not about becoming antisocial or rejecting connection. It's about finding your true self first, then engaging with the world from that authentic place. Think of it this way. Most people are like actors who've forgotten their acting. They've become their roles so completely, they think the mask is their face. But individuation is remembering you're wearing a mask, taking it off, and discovering who's underneath. But here's where it gets interesting. When you step away from society's constant noise, something remarkable happens. Jung called it encountering the self, capital S. Not your ego, not your persona, but the totality of who you are. The parts society told you to hide, the aspects that don't fit the mold, the depths you've never explored. This isn't some mystical escape. It's practical psychology. Every time you choose solitude over another meaningless social obligation, you're not isolating, you're integrating. You're gathering the scattered pieces of yourself that you've been leaving in every interaction where you had to be someone else. If this is making sense to you, subscribe to the channel. And this is just the beginning. Because once you start this process, you realize something shocking. The person you thought you were, the one trying so hard to fit in, that was never really you. That was what Jung called the persona, the mask you wore to navigate society. The real you has been waiting underneath, patient but persistent, sending you signals through that discomfort, that exhaustion, that longing for something more. Here's the transformation. Instead of seeing your need for solitude as a deficiency, you recognize it as intelligence. Your psyche knows what it needs to become whole. Every moment of stepping away isn't retreat, it's advancement toward your authentic self. But there's one aspect of this most people completely miss, and it changes everything. Jung discovered that when you step away from society, you don't just find yourself, you find your shadow, all the parts of you that society deemed unacceptable, that you learned to hide, that you pushed into unconsciousness. This is where the real work begins. In solitude, without the constant distraction of performing for others, these shadow aspects start emerging. The anger you weren't allowed to feel, the creativity you were told was impractical, the wildness you learned to tame, the intelligence you dimmed to fit in. And here's the profound part. Integrating these shadow aspects doesn't make you darker. It makes you whole. Jung understood that we're not meant to be purely good, according to society's definition. We're meant to be complete. When you embrace your shadow, you stop projecting it onto others. You stop being triggered by people who display what you've repressed. You become psychologically free. This is why stepping away from society feels so threatening to others. When you integrate your shadow, you become unpredictable to those who need you to stay in character. You might speak truths they're not ready to hear. You might pursue paths that challenge their choices. You might simply be so authentic that it highlights their performative existence. But here's what's incredible. This integration process, this shadow work, it can only happen in solitude. You need space from society's constant reinforcement of who you should be to discover who you actually are. And once you do this work, once you integrate these hidden aspects, you return to society not as someone who needs to fit in, but as someone who chooses how to engage. Here's the complete reframe that changes everything. Stepping away from society isn't abandoning the world. It's preparing to serve it authentically. Jung knew that only individuated people, those who've done the inner work, can truly contribute to collective consciousness rather than just reinforcing collective unconsciousness. Imagine this. You wake up no longer exhausted by the thought of another day of pretending. Your energy isn't drained by maintaining facades because you're not maintaining any. When you speak, it's from your truth, not from a script. When you connect with others, it's real connection, not performance. You attract people who resonate with your authenticity while naturally repelling those who need you to play a role. You become what Jung called an individuated being, someone who's integrated their shadow, acknowledged their depths, and emerged whole. You're no longer triggered by others' opinions because you're not dependent on external validation. You've found what Jung called the self, that center of your psyche that knows who you are beyond all roles and expectations. This isn't about becoming a hermit. It's about becoming real. And when you're real, when you've done this inner work, you return to society as a force of consciousness, not unconsciousness. You become someone who gives others permission to be authentic simply by being authentic yourself. Think about the ripple effect. Every time you choose authenticity over performance, you create space for others to do the same. Every time you honor your need for solitude without guilt, you model self-respect. Every time you speak from your integrated self rather than your persona, you remind others that there's another way to exist. This is why Jung said, individuation is not just personal work, it's collective healing. When you step away from society to find yourself, you're not abandoning your responsibility to others. You're preparing to serve them from a place of wholeness rather than wounding, authenticity rather than anxiety, truth rather than performance. The journey starts with a simple recognition: that pull you feel towards solitude, that exhaustion from maintaining masks, that longing for something deeper. That's not pathology. That's psychology. That's your psyche calling you home to yourself. So here's my question for you, and I'd love to hear your answer in the comments. What mask have you been wearing that you're finally ready to take off? Share your experience below, and let's build a community of people brave enough to step away from the performance and into authenticity. Remember, when you step away from society, you're not becoming less connected. You're preparing for real connection. You're not becoming antisocial. You're becoming individually social, engaging from choice rather than compulsion, from authenticity rather than anxiety. The world doesn't need another performer. It needs you, the real you that emerges when you finally give yourself permission to step off stage and into your truth. That's not isolation. That's individuation. And according to Jung, it's the most important work you'll ever do.